All right, cue us up, Nick.
Okay, sweet. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the factory floor, where we talk about everything we want to, and you listen. We are going to go through a quote that we have from LinkedIn from someone that we all follow semi-closely. His name is Pep Laha. Okay, so I'll just read it out for you, and then we'll kind of go through some of the major bullet points, and we're just going to kind of like dissect and cut this into pieces. But first, let's introduce ourselves. We have Zach Stevens. Zach, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, Nick. Pleasure to be
What'd
here.
you just get in the mail?
I got my brand new laptop, which I'm super stoked about because now all my insanely layered Figma files are going to load at the speed of light, we hope. And I won't get cut off in my Loom videos anymore. So I'm really looking forward to it.
That's great. Fantastic. And then we have Corey Haynes. Corey, how are you?
Kind of itchy, to be honest. I have like a chemical burn from a jacuzzi, and it makes my like thighs really itchy.
Okay.
TMI.
Is there anything we could do to help you?
No. Even if there was something that we could help with, the fact that he confessed to having a chemical burn itch on our podcast, I'm not going to help him. You're going to have to sit here and suffer through that.
I hope this is the one with the most views and tons of people know about your chemical burn. Okay, let's keep going.
As long as they don't know about his herpes, that's the most important part.
Right. Yeah. We won't talk.
That's the least.
We won't say that.
That was the least bad.
Yeah. And then my name is Nick Loudon. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. So let's get into this post from Pep, and I'll just read it real quick. It says, I surveyed 50 B2B SaaS CMOs from 50 million to 1 billion plus in revenue, and their most pressing marketing issues right now. Sorry. The response was brutal. They're spending more to acquire worse customers. And here are the top 3 issues. And then he rattles through the top 3, which are increasing customer acquisition costs, number 1, pipeline development challenges, number 2, and need for brand and marketing differentiation, number 3. So I figure we'll start with number 1 and just kind of like get a little bit of the lay of the land. This is the first one, so I'm assuming it's the most important. But that's increasing customer acquisition costs. Corey, I know you do the SaaS marketing summit, right? Where you collect all the surveys and these things. I'm curious if you felt as though, I know these are, different levels of companies and things like that. If you felt as though this was all true.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think it's spot on. I mean, to be honest, it's funny because you look at the top 3 reasons, and it's all pointing back to like marketing is really hard and keeps getting harder. So like, these are all the reasons why marketing is hard and keeps getting harder. So it's not really super surprising. On the State of SaaS Marketing Survey, I think that we saw, definitely the companies that indexed are at a much smaller scale. They're usually in like the $500,000 to $5 million in the ARR kind of range. But really like that shouldn't change anything at all because everyone's experiencing all the same problems, especially increasing customer acquisition costs, CAC. And I mean, it's interesting that we keep seeing this because marketing was supposed to get easier over time because it's like, oh, AI makes everything way easier. Like you can do more for less and everything's so scalable and the ad platforms are so good. But what I think it comes down to is competition. Yeah, every time the competition goes up, customer acquisition costs are also going to go up because it's kind of it's driving everything up. There's the market economics of like when there's more people fighting for the same finite number of people's attention, then the bidding goes up for how much you can pay to acquire that person's attention.
Yeah, that's an interest. So I think that the sheer mass it's interesting how number 1 and number 3 are greatly intertwined with one another, but maybe we'll talk about that once we get to number 3. I was listening to a podcast with Greg McKeown, who wrote the book Essentialism, and they were kind of breaking down just like the era that we're in as far as like innovation goes. So you can think back to like the Stone Age, then you have the Industrial Revolution, and then you have the Information Age, which is what we were in up until about this point, and what they're speculating now is that we're actually in the influencer age. And that's to circumvent the fact that information became so widely accessible that now it's not about a limited amount of options, it's about an excessive amount of options. So the choice paradox is what's coming into play here, where people have way too many options and they feel like there's so many things for them to choose from. It's like they walked into Baskin Robbins and instead of 31 flavors, there's as many flavors as they could ever want. And there's no possible way for them to discern which one is actually going to be the best fit for them at a service level, at least not without being able to try it or to having something that's a really strong emotional connection to something that already exists. Like, well, I'm going to choose pistachio because that's the flavor that my dad always got. And that's a more subjective reason as opposed to a factual, like, well, this flavor is objectively better than the other ones that I could choose from. And I think the same thing applies to software companies. It's like they're not objectively better, they're subjectively better between one another, which is makes the decision even harder.
Both of you brought up competition, and like that's like kind of the crux of like, okay, there's all these competitors. Is there so many more competitors because building products like this or products in whatever spaces has gotten way easier? Is that the main reason why it's like, okay, now there's, instead of 3 big players in a specific niche of an industry, there's 25 or 100? Is it because people have figured out like, hey, it's not like that hard to set up a business with a Stripe account and to hire a developer and do this for 3 months and then have a product? Like, it's not that crazy to go and do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's ease, but I also think this is just what happens when a market becomes mature. The SaaS market is maybe like coming to be around 20 years old now. I think it was like the mid 2000s to like maybe like 2010 was probably like the pivot point where B2B SaaS really became an established category. And then everybody started jumping on this opportunity to recreate all the manual, pen and paper and spreadsheet processes into dedicated software platforms. A lot of funding followed that from VC. A lot of entrepreneurs jumped into the space. A lot of people decided to innovate. And now, like Zach mentioned, we just have a plethora of options. And we've kind of filled every gap that we need to, essentially like the essential gaps in the market for what software should exist, right? And so now every new incremental company that's created to solve this existing solved problem just makes it harder and harder for everybody else in that existing category to acquire the same customers. So to me, this is a mature market. I think that AI and in this next wave will kind of like reshift everything a bit. But at the same time, like if you look at other industries that are a lot older, like, I don't know, oil or energy or phones, hardware, et cetera, like I think that Apple talked about this maybe in like 2019 or 2020, where they felt like everybody who should have a phone has a phone now. And so now like the market is just split between Apple users and like Google/Android users. A similar thing maybe in SaaS, where it's like everybody that should have all these software platforms now has their software stack. And now we're more fighting to replace software versus adding software for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, I think that maybe they're just not as big anymore. Like you're not going to have that opportunity to create the kind of platform that can scale across multiple markets that is going to be that dominating thing. It's going to be way more granular as far as the decision that you make is in which platform you choose. Like, I mean, we see this all the time with people even trying to switch between web platforms. Like Webflow has very good use cases for the types of people that we work with, which are SaaS companies who don't necessarily have a lot of e-commerce requirements. They really just need to be able to pump out content fast and send and have it be designed really well. But then you have things like Squarespace or like there's this other one I think it was like YBuild or something like that, or Wix or all those other platforms. And the reason that you choose those aren't because they're objectively better or because they solve a solution, like they solve a problem that you don't have a solution to. You have multiple solutions to it. It's going to be one that's like partial to you. So the granularity of like, how can I niche down maybe even further and that way acquire more of the market? I think that that's what is like what we're going to be seeing now even more. Like I've always thought of this idea of like, well, what if there was a accounting software specifically for tattoo shops? You know, because like tattoo shops have very specific things that they always keep track of, or even like guitar shops, or just, you know, things that like we made this specifically for you. And yeah, there's not as many people in that market, but if we're going to try and acquire more market share and become something that's irreplaceable, we're going to have to rely on those more subjective features as opposed to something that's objectively better across multiple markets.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is for each of these three, like give like a, hey, if you're facing this, like here's a little nugget or something, like maybe we try this move. Like if you're one of these 50 B2B SaaS CMOs, which, and you're listening to this, that would be awesome. No, I'm just kidding. Or if you're anyone experiencing any of these issues, like what can we give them like at least a little bit of that prescription or that remedy of like, okay, what would you do? What's a little practical step that they could take to move through and deal with something like increasing customer acquisition costs?
May I create a springboard for this that Corey can riff off of?
Go for it.
So one of the things that we talk about very frequently is that ads aren't really the problem anymore. It's going to be, where are people going after the ads? This might not necessarily be the case for these larger companies, although we've seen some pretty egregious landing pages from very, very well-funded and profitable companies. But it seems to be that the ads aren't necessarily the problem. And a lot of people put so much money into that top of the funnel, but they neglect the middle of the funnel, specifically their landing page. What do you think about that, Corey?
Yeah. Oh, that's totally it. Like, I think that a lot of people have become complacent with putting money in certain places and then expecting everything else to kind of fall into place as far as conversion rates. And okay, now the people know that we exist. Now they should be able to sign up. And it's like, no, not really. Like you have to do a really good job of convincing them these days. So just because you got them to your landing page doesn't mean that they're going to then sign up. We saw this a lot with the advent of free trials. And this is how marketing goes too, is everybody's always looking for a competitive edge, right? So, back in the day, even with SaaS, it was like, oh, sign up today, start paying us $1,000 a year, and then you can get up and running with our software. And that created a decent amount of friction, right? So that anybody who wanted to disrupt that company or kind of steal their lunch then started offering something like a free trial. And a lot of people with a free trial started offering freemium. And then everybody with freemium started offering like these concierge migration packages and different offers and incentives and buying out their competitors' contracts. And the friction keeps going lower and lower and lower. And that's all because the optimizations can't be made in the ad platforms very much. And you can't really spend your way out of these problems. You really have to take a good hard look at the full funnel all the way from the beginning of the customer journey to the end. And practically, I think that a lot of companies have to think about trimming the fat out of their marketing. A lot of companies already have, but the point I wanted to make was that sometimes it's hard to distinguish between the meat and the fat. Sometimes people are cutting actually the good parts of their programs that are profitable, and they really need to be cutting the things that aren't moving the needle at all. And I can't say what's what for any company, right? But I'm just saying that can be hard to distinguish, and you have to make sure that you're cutting the right things.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Let's go on to number 2. I think it was great. Did you have something else, Corey?
Just one more thought. This is more just like a question. I don't know. But one of the other things it makes me think of is like, what's the relationship between rising customer acquisition costs and economic inflation? Because we saw a lot of inflation in the last 5 years since COVID. I would just assume that costs are going to go up for your cost per click, for your vendors for your services, SaaS providers, do a price increase. The dollar isn't a dollar anymore, right? And I think that kind of cascades down to everything. So, but I don't know what that relationship is. So, and maybe it's kind of a non-factor because that's always been something people have to account for. I don't know, but it's just thinking out loud.
The economic impact, there isn't really a whole lot of industries that it doesn't touch or doesn't mess with the transfer of goods or services. It's going to touch a little bit, or it's going to at least snake its way into oh, well, now we should probably raise our price or else we can't, cover these other costs of PPC or whatever. It's interesting.
Right. Yeah. I guess the other point just on that is I don't know if we'll ever see a survey response that's oh, customer acquisition costs are going down. Cool. It's they're probably always going to go up.
They just might go up slower.
Yeah.
Right.
Gosh, I can't imagine what it's going to be like in 5 years. Check back with us then.
Really bad. Yeah. Keep listening. We'll see you in 5 years.
Time capsule this.
Well, let's do number 2, which is pipeline development challenges. So kind of what he was saying is CMOs are seeing their tried and true pipeline playbooks fall apart. The budget's limited. It's not clear that even a bigger budget would even help. So I guess I want to get your take. This is kind of the next step, right? After okay, it's cost so much more to even, get the leads that we need or get the new customers. But in the middle there, you have a pipeline of who's coming in, where are they going, how are they getting to the very end? And it's hard to see that development, I guess. So kind of wanted to see what your guys' thoughts were on, I know he gave some of those quotes and things too.
Well, I'm going to assume that this is more on an enterprise level side, because you wouldn't necessarily, I feel like you wouldn't classify people as leads. You can, but I feel I would just treat them differently if it's a smaller self-serve product versus.
It's the same concept though, because I mean, a freemium or a product-led growth business is going to have a pipeline the same way, because they're going to have this massive free user base, and then they're going to have these kind of leads.
Yeah.
And then then they're going to have another category of those free users that are leads, in the sense that they're showing the positive indicators of potentially becoming a paying user one day. And or a lot of people will look and see, oh, is there any logo that I recognize? Then I can go do outbound sales to these free users, so on and so forth. So pipeline, I think, can also accurately describe enterprise and PLG companies.
Sorry, my daughter just walked in. She just went out. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, Zach, were you going to say something?
No, that makes sense. I think that when they say that their tried and true playbook is falling apart, I guess it's well, why? What causes something that has worked for so long to fall apart? And maybe it's maybe they aren't thinking through the need to innovate a little bit further, and maybe they're just. It sounds like it could be something like a product problem where maybe they're not gating the right things. And
sorry, I was going to add to what you said, because in the initial, in the beginning of his post, it says we're spending more to get worse customers. And in my brain, the pipeline is also the most one of the most valuable pieces of it is the determination of what makes a customer a good customer, and the good customers get to the end is kind of the goal of okay, the pipeline, it's ultimately going to bring these customers in, but it's also making sure that the good ones are seeing the value and ready to click the button at the very end when they get to the bottom of the funnel, So maybe it's related to what types of leads or potential customers get into the pipeline, and that they're all not that good. Maybe that's what it was pointing at, but I could be way off. I don't know.
No, I think there's something there for sure. I've heard of a lot of sales reps that'll tell me it's rare these days that there's just a lead that comes to the door and it feels like you're playing t-ball. It feels like every lead that comes through, they're throwing fastballs at you and you're striking out over and over and over again. In other words, the leads are making your life harder. So the pipeline isn't full of people when can I start? It's they have a entire sheet in front of them where they're interrogating you and you have to pass all these tests and jump through all these hoops in order to keep going further and further down the sales cycle. So you have to prove a lot more. And that's kind of my suspicion about what people mean when they say that their tried and true playbooks are falling apart. There was, like, when I started in marketing, we were kind of right in the middle of this shift from like spray and pray, blasting out direct, cold outreach over email. And that was like the tried and true playbook. And you had SDRs and AEs, and they did this whole process of trying to get leads through, and you're, following up with anybody who downloads an ebook or a white paper, and you're nurturing those leads until they finally give you permission to hop on a call, things like that, right? That to me just feels like a very, very outdated, obsolete model that a lot of larger, older companies are still trying to rely on. And so there's not much juice left in the lemon, and they're still there like, why isn't the juice coming out? And to me, it's just a sign of like, dude, you gotta change things up. You gotta shift. You gotta like abandon the playbook. You know what I mean? Like, if this isn't working very well, stop staffing up so many salespeople on the enterprise side of things and start staffing up more engineers, more marketers, more copywriters, more, customer success, onboarding people. Like, what is the gap that you can fill where you need to like reallocate those resources?
Yeah. Actually, I feel like that might be a good segue to number 3, which is the need for differentiation and brand in marketing. Because if the current playbook is dying, well, what are some of the things that you could do that would separate you and distinguish you from everybody else, so that regardless of what you're like, who comes in the door, they're excited to work with you because of some external factor that isn't necessarily a part of the product, but it's more about who you are and that they want to work with you. What do you think of that?
I was going to say, I think number 3 is like, it's kind of like the remedy for number 2 also, because I know I mentioned we would like, okay, let's solve all of these, but I think number 3 will definitely help. Okay, here's my like high level overview of what like all there's, there used to be, 3 big players in a space, and now there's 25 or 50 or 100. I feel like it feels to me that it used to be that, there was 4 or 5 degrees of separation between these people, all these businesses all in the same industry or niche. And now there's like 0.1 degree of separation. It's like, they're all like, we're exactly like this company, but we also have this one sub feature that's a little different. And our color scheme is blue. Like, it's like, let me give you a new color, that kind of thing. And I feel like that, it's just because of like competition and like there's so many people. Like, how do you differentiate when feels like all the ideas are zapped up? But Corey, I think you were going to say something.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when people say that they feel the need to differentiate, what they're saying is, potential customers are telling me they don't understand why they should choose me over my competitors. And so that's like a symptom, right? No one feels like they need to differentiate until people are like, wait, why should I choose you? You sound exactly like these guys over here and those guys over here. And like the thing that I have right now that I'm already paying for. So it's true in the sense that like, yeah, you absolutely need crystal clear positioning, copywriting, messaging. You have to have like an angle. You have to have differentiators that go just beyond just features and also go into service and price and your brand as a whole, and kind of like what you're representing. It's the service in general, right? It's software as a service. So what are all the ingredients of that service, and all those points of your service need to be differentiated. But again, it's also like, I think this is what happens in mature markets. People need to niche down, but they're scared to. They're scared to plant their flag somewhere and be like, this is the hill that we're going to die on, because then they feel like they're limiting themselves and they're going to be missing out on future opportunities. But then they're just, their signal's getting lost in the noise.
I think there's more of a surface level component to it as well. because I mean we talked about last week about or 2 weeks ago about being copy first versus design first, and one of the things that came up was the trope of homogeneity between all these startups and the way they talk, the way that like the personas around these companies all feel very, very, very similar, especially if you are in a similar market. I feel like, all of the, like the typeface du jour of, those like very goofy humanist typefaces that are kind of extended and have like the cuts, the ink wells in their letters. It's like, yeah, I've seen this before. You get it. You're trying to be human and show that you're not like, some software company in your high tower. But the thing that sucks about that is that the thing that would help differentiate them the most is if they stop trying to be what they think people want them to be. And if they took a look at, well, how do we actually communicate internally and present an authentic version of ourselves, both in the way we speak and in the way that we present our image as a company. And that leads to a lot more cool marketing initiatives like, Loops doing cereal boxes and marketing as cereal, like that's super cool. You could think of, it's about doing things that are almost more artistic as opposed to like, yeah, this is for sure going to bring us in a bunch of money, instead of doing things that are just like, that's cool. Like, why not do that? Like, that sounds like something that's kind of fun. It's interesting. There's a pretty clear dynamic or parallel between Hollywood as well. It's like when you start making movies to make money, they're not going to be good movies. So you have to bring forth that artistic effort, or at least be willing to experiment with it and be okay with the fact that it might not work right away, but it's going to be a long-term play that we're going to help differentiate ourselves and show that we are actually different. Like, can anybody else say that they act this way? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that gets to the point that like positioning and differentiation is super philosophical to a company. It's very existential to a company's existence. Why should I exist? What do I have to offer that is unique? You know what I mean? Why do I deserve to live?
Yeah.
I mean,
who am I? Who created me?
I mean, it's the last question that I asked during the brand strategy stuff. It's like, well, why do you exist? Yeah. Like, what is the driving force behind you? But then the thing that people fail to recognize about that is that it has trickled down to the way that you build your product and the way that you present your product. It comes down to the features. Like, a good example is, like anybody that has like a sustainability approach, they're going to say things like, well, we give 1% of all of our profits to 1% for the planet, or some other kind of charity that they actually care about. And what that does is it not only puts proof of stake of like, no, we actually believe this, here's tangible proof, but anybody else that also thinks the same way is going to feel more emotionally connected to you. And those emotional connections are a lot harder to break, and they're a lot harder to replicate. Whereas anything that has to do with like your prefrontal cortex of like, well, this company costs this much, they have these features, they have X, Y, Z. Now you're moving people into this comparison realm where they're having to think too much. But instead, if they loved you, it'd be very hard for them to even think and consider moving away from somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's funny because you said that you end your position or your branding workshop with that question, and I always start the positioning workshop with that question, or basically with a preface. And I tell them, hey, this is going to be uncomfortable, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to make you like, they're basically going to challenge you, like, why do you exist, and what problems does your product solve, and how does it do it uniquely? And that is hard because so many software companies start as like a lab experiment. They're like, I wonder if this approach to solving this problem works even just a little bit. And then it does, and they keep refining the experiment, so to speak, and they keep building on their product and taking a very MVP approach, following the data. And it works. Companies get to millions of dollars in ARR, and then they sort of have this like Frankenstein understanding of why customers choose them. They're like, well, some choose us for this reason over here, some choose us for that reason. I think that we do this really well. and maybe everyone has a different opinion. I remember experiencing this like firsthand, being a marketer talking to our sales team at a past company and trying to lead them through a similar type of workshop where we're trying to gather a bunch of information from the front lines about like, hey, why are what are the reasons customers are telling you that they're willing to sign the contract and become a client or a customer of ours? And everybody had different answers, which is so funny because there should be like a couple of really, really clear, similar answers, but it just goes to show that everybody interprets things differently. And so you have to be able to take a really deep look into yourself as a company and plant your flag somewhere. But then you also have to get rid of a lot of other stuff and say, oh, we're not going to focus on this segment. We're not going to focus on that use case. We're not going to try to compete up market, or we're not going to try to compete down market, which is uncomfortable always, but that is how you differentiate.
Yeah.
You have to be everything for someone, not everything, someone to everything. What am I trying to say? Does that make sense?
I know what you're
You
saying.
have to be something to
everything.
You have to be something to someone, not everything to everyone.
Yeah.
Or something to everyone. There we go. That was it.
There
Okay.
it is.
You need to be everything to someone, not something to everyone. Like just, we do it all. Like this is the AI problem too, which is like, you go on any of their sites and it's like, it can do anything. Like
Everything.
If you cook my dinner, like what can't it do? And like the chat bot, if you ask, will be like, sure, yeah, we could do that. Like it's just like everything is done.
What was the movie? The movie the Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yeah, that's
Oh yeah, yeah.
Big problem.
Yeah, the who am
Every
I
AI
is-
company's H1 losing Nick. Nick, come back to us.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Did your power die?
Okay, my power like jack down here, like that is like underneath my desk, like fell out and it all just turned off. Oh, that is so funny. Okay, well we can like trim it, right? That exists.
Yeah. Michael,
Sweet,
trim
sorry.
that.
Cut that, bro. Cut it.
Do it,
Wait, what was
Slaves.
I saying? I was gonna say it makes me think of iRobot. That's basically it. The like, what have you seen iRobot with Will Smith?
Mm-hmm.
Where
Not
the
a long,
the
not a
robot's
long,
like,
long time.
what am I? He's like, and then he
Oh.
like runs away. You know, it's like
Yeah.
that's the SaaS is saying, what am I? As Sonny the robot from iRobot, and Will Smith's trying to catch them with his laser gun.
Yeah.
Um,
It's crazy because it does come down to like having a motive besides money, which is tough because I think that everybody, like, obviously you need the pragmatism of, well, our business has to be funded and that funding's got to come from somewhere. We'd prefer if it came from customers. But having those values and also understanding yourself, like what makes you feel the way that you want other people to feel, is a really good source of inspiration. Because, I mean, that's my mantra, right? Is that the great brands aren't created, they're stolen. What are they stolen from? They're stolen from the things that excite you. And when you can, I just feel like it makes it a lot easier to answer the question of like, who do we want to be? It's actually, there's a psychological term for it, and I forget exactly what it is, but you actually don't know your own identity. You only see it as a result of, I like the way that person acts or the way this person behaves, and I want to adorn part of that on myself. That's why when somebody says something like, oh, Corey, you're so much like Nick in this capacity, then you have an understanding of how you act, because you can't actually see it yourself. It's like the pickle in the jar syndrome. You can't read your own label, but you can only see outside, and other people read yours. So if you want to steal your brand, just think of the things that make you feel the way you want other people to feel, preferably not other software companies, and think about the things that they do, the way they act, and the mechanisms that make you feel that way. Is it the colors? Is it the way they speak? Is it the actions they take? Is it the beliefs that they have? Like, and your inspiration can come from anywhere. My soapbox rant, which is done now.
over. And I stepped down,
I love
sir.
I have
Go ahead.
No, go. You go.
Okay, my turn. Yeah. I was gonna say I am really glad that this is point number 3, and that this is one of the three biggest problems that software companies have, because it's like two of the most important things that we do is that, Corey, you have your positioning workshop and all of this like positioning and market differentiation type knowledge. And Zach's like intense with branding and like how to make this exactly like what your belief system and everything that like started this business like turns into a beautiful brand that like really sets you apart. So I'm very glad that this is a major problem for everyone. So thank you guys for having this issue so we can fix it. Okay, sorry, Corey, what were you going to say?
No, I kind of have a hot take a little bit that it's funny that marketers and CMOs are saying that they need brand and marketing differentiation, because I also feel like it's not just the marketer's job to figure out the differentiation and the positioning strategy. I think as a marketer, your job becomes a lot easier when your product team is really, really opinionated and in tune with your customers. And I'm not like trying to crap on product people or CTOs or anything like that, but engineers have a tendency to be like, oh yeah, we could be used for this and we could also be used for that. And like the software can do anything, because they're purely thinking logically about like, they know the software so in depth, they almost think too highly of it. They're like, oh yeah, well, we have a WYSIWYG that can be used as like a website builder and or an app builder. And it's like, no, just choose one. Which one should we do? And so if the product team were to be a lot more opinionated about, no, we think that we can do this best, and they know their competitors and they can choose that direction for their roadmap. And then the marketers can turn those opinions into your messaging and into your positioning strategy, and then roll that out to your sales team. It becomes a lot easier because then otherwise you're fighting with your product team all the time. If I really hate as a marketer and doing our workshops with our clients being like, hey, we should plant our flag here and ignore all these other things over there, because now I'm telling them that like, you can't have those things and you're wrong about wanting those things. I want them to be like, no, I really want this one thing and I really want to do this one thing really, really well. I'm like, great, we can help you do that. Let's go turn that into the messages that are going to convert. So anyways, that's my hot take about like, if marketers want better differentiation, they need their CPOs and their CTOs to have better differentiation.
Is it a hot take if it's completely correct?
It's who he's placing the blame on.
Correct.
It's who he's placing the blame on.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
No one wants to point fingers, but
we're just pointing fingers at everyone else. So there you go. Gentlemen, any final thoughts? No. It's solved.
Well, I think my final takeaway, which I want to emphasize, is to embrace a little bit more artistry. Like if the things that you are used to doing aren't working anymore, it's going to hurt a little bit and you're probably going to regress a little when you're trying out these new ventures, but that's okay, because part of this process and change is art. It's chaos. Like you don't know what's going to happen, but you do know what's going to happen if you try and stick with the status quo and keep doing what you've been doing, which is not working. So give yourself some permission to experiment and fail a little bit in the hopes that you'll actually come up with something new. Because like if you're going to innovate, you are going to create mess. And that's what this problem is. It's an innovation problem. It's not an efficiency problem. It's an innovation problem. And the lack of willing to take risk to try and do something different.
Yeah. I was just thinking, this might be contrary to everything that I've said previously. But it's okay, because these will all be different clips, so no one will be able to tell. The thing I was thinking about was sometimes when you try to, so for example, if you're like, oh, we're not getting as many customers, so we should ramp down our marketing. We should do less marketing because it's not as efficient as we want it to. And sometimes that's actually not the right answer. Sometimes you actually have to turn the dial up and do more things in order to, like, for things to level out again, essentially. Swing harder, make bigger bets, do stranger, more creative marketing stunts, do the artistic, chaotic things like Zach was mentioning. I don't know if you can really like effectively decrease your customer acquisition costs super well. Like I said, you can trim the fat if there's like things that obviously aren't working, just reallocate the budget. But if you're like, hey, we're getting less worse customers, so we should turn our marketing down, then you're going to get even less worse customers. You know what I mean? You need to do better marketing. And sometimes that means spending more for a while to get out of that. Same thing with the pipeline development. If it's like, man, it's really hard to get these leads to convert into customers, and everyone keeps, moving or keeps dropping off at a certain stage of the onboarding cycle or the sales cycle for whatever reason, that doesn't mean necessarily that you need to like qualify them more or make it harder for them to move through the sales cycle. Sometimes that means that you need to make it even easier and even less qualified people to come through, because maybe the right people aren't coming through the door in the first place because it's so time consuming to do so, or whatever the reason might be, right?
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, if I had to put a label on all these, it's doing a little bit of things that don't scale.
Yeah,
which is a big problem. Like, because experiments don't scale very well at first. Trying new things doesn't scale very well at first. Maybe going and talking to your customer base doesn't scale very well at first, but it yields compounding benefit down the road. And it's like, just, you're going to have to work a little bit to make it happen.
I like what you said, turn the heat up. That makes me think of like a big pot. Like, okay, they have this big marketing pot that they put all these ingredients in and like all this stuff. And like, it all kind of boiled down to like, okay, this is how we do it. We pay for this and we do this organic, and like that is the machine that runs. And now it's kind of like, okay, it's dried up. Like, don't turn it up again and add a ton more ingredients in and like put more water in and like boil it. And it's going to like, you need to like reorchestrate this whole like boil or cook that you made and get more ingredients, more things to test out again. What's going to boil down to the bottom and actually be the thing that carries your business forward and refills your pipeline and lowers all that stuff. That's really interesting. I like that you said turn the heat up and like turn this little analogy in my brain on. But super good. Okay. Thank you for your final thoughts. I thought that was great. I really liked going through all this content today, and who knows what we'll go through next time. You'll have to stay tuned and find out. Anything else, gentlemen? Good? Happy with everything you said?
I think we're great. Yeah.
No takesy backsies?
Felt cute. Might delete later. We'll see.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening to the Factory Floor, and we will see you guys next time.